Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for our special Brave Girls virtual story time with author and illustrator Selina Alko as she reads her 2015 picture book, The Case for Loving. My name is Emma, and I'm the Associate Educator of Digital Learning and Innovation at the National Women's History Museum. A few housekeeping notes. Selina will be answering questions at the end of her reading. You're welcome to ask your questions at any time during the program by using the Q&A function on your toolbar. We might not be able to get to all of your questions, but we're going to do our best. And Selina is really, really happy to answer your questions. So today we are going to be reading a book about a really important moment in history, and its celebration, Loving Day, is this coming Monday, June 12th. So we are really excited to be reading this book today. And with that, I would like to introduce our author. Selina Alko is an award-winning writer and illustrator. Hi, Selina. Growing up in Vancouver, British Columbia, she was surrounded by the melody of words and stories from different places and varied visual possibilities. Her childhood was full of art and books, the skills her parents imparted to her as a child, the creative environment that supported them, and the diverse worldview she was privy to have inspired and fueled her ever since and are evident in her many children's books. Some of her award-winning books include The Case for Loving, The Fight for Interracial Marriage, our book today. B is for Brooklyn, Daddy, Christmas, and Hanukkah Mama. I is for Immigrants, and Joni, The Lyrical Life of Joni Mitchell. Now, as the mother of two children, Selina looks to carry on some of the traditions that encouraged her. Selina, we are so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here too.
And with that, I will let you take it away.
Hi. I am going to start, I think, by reading my book, The Case for Loving. And then afterwards, perhaps I will talk a little bit about how the book came to be and answer any of your questions. So without further ado, The Case for Loving, The Fight for Interracial Marriage. Title page. It's dedicated to my children. And next, okay. First comes love, then comes marriage. Donald, Peggy, and Sydney had two parents who loved them and who loved each other. In fact, from almost the moment Richard Loving met Mildred Jeter, they wanted to get married and have a family. But for them, it wasn't that simple, and here's why. Richard was white, a fair-skinned boy who got quickly sunburned in July. Mildred was what they called colored in those days, her skin a creamy caramel. In 1958, they lived in a small town of Central Point, Virginia, where people every shade from the color of chamomile tea to summer midnight made their homes. Richard Loving was a tall, quiet man of English and Irish heritage. The person he loved most was Mildred Jeter. Mildred was part African American and part American Indian, and she was thin as a rail. That's how she got the nickname String Bean. When Richard popped the question, String Bean jumped with joy. The two were in love. They felt it should be their right to get married. Sadly, it was not. Not in Virginia or 16 other states. In those places, marriage between people of different races was against the law. 100 years earlier, slavery divided America along color lines. Even after slavery ended, some white people weren't used to blacks being free, let alone free to marry whom they chose. If you married someone who had skin color unlike your own, you could go to jail. Mildred and Richard wanted to get married, but they did not want to spend any time in prison. Although they couldn't have a legal marriage in Virginia, they could right next door in Washington, D.C. So they invited a few friends and family to witness their wedding across state lines. At the ceremony, nobody objected when Richard said, "I do," And Mildred said, I do, too. The Lovings were officially pronounced husband and wife. The blushing bride and her groom smiled all the way from D.C. back to their house in Virginia. They couldn't wait to start a family. But soon, something terrible happened. In the middle of the night, they were awoken from their sleep. It was the police. An officer shouted at Richard, "What are you doing with that woman?" Richard proudly pointed to their marriage certificate hanging on the wall. "That's not good here," the policeman boomed. And just like that, Mildred and Richard were taken away and locked up in jail. They were charged with unlawful cohabitation, which means living together against the law. The Lovings didn't think there was anything unlawful about their love at all. If anything, the way they were treated should have been unlawful. It was just awful. After a few nights behind bars, Richard and Mildred were told they had to leave Virginia if they wanted to live together as Mr. and Mrs. Loving. So, with heavy hearts, the pair hugged their families, packed their bags, and left their home. They tried to make a life for themselves in D.C. Richard found a job laying bricks, and String Bean gave birth to 3 babies, 3 different shades of milk chocolate brown: Donald, Peggy, and Sydney. But the city didn't suit the Lovings. There were too many cars. There was too much concrete. They missed Central Point with its rolling hills and open spaces. They missed their friends and families. They missed their home. They wanted to return to Virginia for good, so they hired lawyers to help fight for what was right. By now, it was 1966, and the times they were a-changin'. Brand new ideas like equal rights for people of all colors were replacing old, fearful ways of thinking. The lawyers worked around the clock to make the case for interracial marriage as strong as possible. It was time to take the Loving case all the way to the Supreme Court. On June 12, 1967, when the case of Loving versus Virginia began, Richard and Mildred stayed at home with Donald, Peggy, and Sydney. They were all nervous and afraid they would not win. The state argued that in order to preserve the purity of the white race, blacks and whites must remain separate. Then it was the Lovings' lawyers' turn to present their case. They said it was unconstitutional to make marriage a crime because of race. And they read a message from Richard himself. "Tell the court I love my wife, and it's just unfair that I can't live with her in Virginia." It didn't take long for a decision to be made. It was unanimous. The court ruled in favor of the Lovings. Interracial couples could now legally marry in Virginia. Richard and Mildred hugged. They won the right to their love. They were free at last. Over 9 years after their arrest, the Lovings packed their bags one final time. Richard planned to build a big, roomy brick house in Central Point. String Bean was ready to start their life over. The Loving family returned to Virginia to live happily and legally ever after. The end. There's some more notes at the back of the book if you're interested.
Thank you so much, Selina, for reading that really important and engaging story. And I really loved all of the pictures. I've been sharing some links in the chat to learn more about you, to purchase the book, and teacher resources. But I also want to remind our audience that Selina is very happy to take your questions. You can put them in the Q&A. But just to get us started, Selina, how did you first learn about the Lovings?
Well, I have two children who are biracial, and when they were little, friends started in our neighborhood started sort of telling us about this Loving Day festival that happened every June 12th, and it was for interracial couples and families. And so that was the first time I heard. I am Canadian born. I did not grow up in the United States, and I was unfamiliar with the Supreme Court case Loving versus Virginia. So it was all very new to me once I had my own children to learn about the history of how the laws changed, and the case, the Supreme Court case, based on the last name of the couple, Loving, which could not be more fitting. So that's how I first heard about it when my children were little.
Very exciting. So I guess kind of along these questions of process, about,
Mhm.
about the book itself, I mean, what made you want to write this book, and what was your favorite part of process?
Well, so then it became a curiosity about learning more. And I'm a trained illustrator, and I've been doing children's books for a couple decades. So at this point, it had been already over 10 years, and I was starting to also write stories as well as illustrate, and always looking for new topics to explore in the picture book format. And at that point, there were no picture books. There were no books for children about the Loving case. And there were lots of other civil rights case books done in picture book format. So I ran the idea by my agent and other people, and it seemed like a really perfect, place to dig deeper and explore the issues, and then also bring pictures to this important story. So um, I loved doing the research and learning more and getting all of the details, to down and in store in sort of simplified for a younger audience. It was a challenge, and it was also really fulfilling and interesting for me to work on.
Thank you for that answer. Now, I know you shared with me some pictures of your drawing process, and I was wondering, if I shared my screen again, if you could tell us a little bit about those images.
Sure,
So,
that'd be great.
so we have,
Oh, these are some photographs. There was a lot of, in getting the characters to be true to who they were. Luckily, there were a plethora of black and white images of the Loving family, because at the time when they won their Supreme Court case, a photographer from Life magazine was sent to their home to spend a week with the family. And there was a whole spread in Life magazine done of the family. So we were able to access a lot of photographs to work from, to create the work. And as you can see, it's important to get likenesses, but then also to do the artwork in our own style. So oh,
and
that was a manuscript. But these are some thumbnail sketches. So very, very early, teeny tiny sketches, just to kind of get the sense of the the characters and the feeling. We wanted to do a lot of sort of imagery of love and freedom and celebration of this couple and their family. And yeah, did I share any other sketches with you? Oh, this is an early one of the proposal. I mean, super simple. Just these are kind of the kind of simple highlights of the story that are understandable and relatable to children, because this is a children's book. So
But there's also so much joy in this image with String Bean's arms thrown up in the air. I mean, even you're saying it's a simple sketch, but there's so much emotion in it. So, just really telling the story.
Yeah.
And
And here to the finish art, of course, we had to make String Bean slimmer to fit her nickname. Um, and also just a lot more hearts, a lot more butterflies to really emphasize that joy and that love between them, because that's really the fundamental point of this story. Is here are two people who loved each other very, very much, and they were told that they were not allowed to be married in their hometown.
well, thank you for that kind of inside look. So I guess another question for you is, what was the most interesting thing you learned while writing The Case for Loving?
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of fascinated by how long it took for the case to be resolved, that it took 9 long years, and that the family actually had to move to DC, right next door, where the laws were different, state by state, and that's where they were allowed to reside, and it took that many years, but they were persistent, did not give up, and thankfully they were able to, you know, win in the end. So yeah, the time is what amazed me.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving a little bit away from the book to ask more of a question about you. So, when we were talking or when I was introducing you, I mentioned that, grew up surrounded by words and lyricism. How about books? Were books really important to you growing up as a kid? And if so, do you have any favorites that you remember?
Yeah, I books were very important to me. When I was very little, it was Richard Scarry and all of his books that had images paired with little words, and I just would get very, very lost in his books. And then as I um, got older, it was really Judy Blume and her stories, hugely formative. I read them, all of them, over and over again. They kept me company. They were my best friends. Yeah, and then in between, things like Curious George, the Oz books. I just love stories. Hmm.
I remember going in my elementary school library and seeing all of the spines of the Judy Blume books, but they were generally checked out. So yeah, Judy Blume definitely is a resonates with me as well. And then I guess for our young audience, particularly because you shared some of those, initial sketches, what are your suggestions for our young audience who might be looking to become an illustrator or want to start writing and drawing their own stories? Do you have any suggestions for getting started?
Yeah. Keep a sketchbook and draw whatever you're inspired by. It's very important to be true to yourself. So I like to carry a sketchbook whenever I travel, and it's almost like a diary. Nobody needs to see it. It's for myself. And I like to paint in my sketchbook. I paint and I do collage and mixed media, and I get really messy. Let's see if I have a sketchbook here that I could show you some pages. Oh, well, this is a new character that I'm working on right here for a new project. And this is in my sketchbook. But let's see if I have some other pages here. Just, like flowers and tree. So, I get kind of messy, and I just do mixed media a lot. I might add words like voice. I love hand lettering, and I think keeping a sketchbook is my biggest advice, and also just don't judge yourself. You know, your voice is your own, and everyone has a unique voice, and we all are artists, and we have stories within us, and don't be afraid to let them out.
That's some amazing advice, and I too think that I'm going to take that advice and keep a sketchbook. I'm a doodler myself, so nothing as kind of complete as what's in your sketchbook. Just lots of little lines and dots. But I think, yeah, this idea that you have a story to tell and you have drawings to make is so important to remember as a young person or person at any age. Right, your voice matters. Going
Mhm.
back to your picture with voice. Now, you showed us kind of a sneak peek of a new character. So can you tell us what you're working on next?
Sure. So it's a story called Sharing Shalom, and it's a little girl who goes to Hebrew school, and then there's an incident of sort of violence at the synagogue where she goes to school. It's called anti-Semitism, and her mother explains what that means. She goes to public school, and then she realizes she has this moment of realization that she's different from the other kids in her class because she's Jewish. And then the community kind of comes together and helps repair the synagogue. And at the end of the story, she teaches her classmates how to write the word shalom, which means peace in Hebrew. So it's sort of a story about anti-Semitism and also community understanding and empathy and uh, so on. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a very a very important and amazing book, and also talking about a really important issue, just like the case for Loving also talks about a really important issue and moment in U.S. history. So I personally am looking very forward to seeing your next book hit the shelves.
Thank you.
Well, Selina, I just want to thank you so much again for reading The Case for Loving and helping us get started on celebrating Loving Day, which again is Monday, June 12th, it's coming Monday. It has been so wonderful to talk to you and to hear your advice for our young audience members to get started on their next creative project. So to our audience, thank you again so much for joining us today. And we hope you will join us next year for Brave Girls. We're going on hiatus for the summer, but we will hope to see you in the fall. And again, Selina, thank you so much. It's been so wonderful.
You're
Bye,
welcome.
everyone.
You're welcome. It was wonderful.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Stay safe and enjoy the summer.
Yes. Happy summer. Bye.